So we've been talking about brand integrity, brands with character. Dex has given us a lot of content to go over. And the embodiment of values and vision and how that matters in a brand with integrity, internal culture and external culture. And first of all, I just want to what are some thoughts you guys have on that as we're opening up? Like, what are things that you've been wrestling with, noodling over, thinking about what it means to have a brand with integrity, or even lead with integrity?
Yeah, no, that's so good. I just feel like there's a gap, right? There's a gap that's been identified. Is like you can build this gorgeous brand. It can sound right, walk right, say all the things right, and then it's like, okay, bye. And you see things start to fall apart, right? It's kind of like, it's almost like how we view social media, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna have this like perfect social media plan, this really great content strategy, but it's actually nothing internally has changed. So you're performing, you're not actually telling the story of the good work that you're doing and inviting people into changing their own identity, right? Because that's what nonprofits are doing, is they're actually inviting you, like, after you give, who will you be on the other side of that? People are looking, I think, to step into a new identity, and I think brands, really answering that call of like brand integrity, like who are we on the inside, and letting that lead the outside. So I'm just excited about what's going on with Eligible.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about how a lot of people call and like, I don't really want to dabble in marketing. Like, I don't know how to do that. It feels like, what am I supposed to be doing? How am I supposed to be doing it? Is this post okay? And I'm like, it's so interesting how there's this like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like this ambivalent, like right way of doing it that we haven't completely grasped yet. And really what you're called to be, and do is commit to your vision and who you've committed to be in the world. Now that you have that show up on every platform and every interaction that people have, instead of, are we doing this right? And like, who says it's right? And like, who's like determining that? Like, no, the uniqueness of your brand and your vision is what needs to be the story. That the integrity of that. And then outside of the performance, to serve that and to serve your audience well,
But go ahead. Honestly, when the vision is unclear, though, it's really hard. You do get stuck in this larger, grander image of what it's supposed to be versus like what is. And so if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, then of course everything else just feels like a challenge. You've got no measuring tool, you've got no accountability, no framework to just really lean into to where you can actually be comfortable feeling organic, doing exactly what you were called to do. Yeah.
That's when it's dangerous too.
That's when it's dangerous?
That's when it starts to be like a performance.
Yeah.
That's when you start to lose yourself, right? Then it's like you're looking to the left, looking to the right. Well, okay, Charity Water is doing it this way. Okay, like World Vision is doing it this way. So, and then all of a sudden it's like, you get to the marketing team and the marketing team can't really communicate what's really going on.
Yeah.
Like everything is just a regurgitation of like what other people are doing.
Mm-hmm. Or even other people in the organization can't determine what's going on. So people confuse the brand with an image, and they pursue the image without understanding what the brand is going to be. I go to lots of conferences where people have clearly spent thousands of dollars on a visual look to their organization. But when you talk to the folks that are actually there, you won't get the same vision from any two people that you speak to.
Yeah.
So they put all this energy and resources into the way something looks without then having that unifying connection as to here's what we're about first. And then letting that drive what the presentation should be.
Well, that's a great point. I mentioned this the other day to a friend who was talking about brand identity, and he was really stuck on this. He's a designer, so we do that. We think it looks good. But I was saying, that simply falling into a slick look and feel, that's like the Spanx of branding, right? It's just like you can bear it. Yeah, you can like bear it for a little while. It can hide a lot of the flaws, but at some point, you have to deal with whatever's going on underneath it. Either by being really comfortable with it, which is what we want to do from a brand strategy standpoint. Get 100% honest, be 100% authentic, love that about yourself, and then flaunt it. You can talk about it, show it, video it, display it, all of that sort of stuff. And that sort of ties back to one of my favorite passages in the Bible is Acts 4:20. I spent a year reading every book, chapter 4, verse 20, if it has that.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
because I was smoking a lot of weed and was trying not to. So I was like, the Bible's got to have something like that.
Oh my God, I think that's my favorite thing I've ever heard come out of your mouth.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So Acts 4:20, after the disciples were sort of like, they told them, don't talk, anymore. And they say, regardless of if you think it's right and right in the eyes of God, right in the eyes of man, whatever, Acts 4:20 says, we cannot keep silent about what we have seen and heard.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's branding. Like, that's
Yeah.
marketing. That's, okay, here's what we know about ourselves. We love it. We know it's got flaws. We're working on those, but we're really going to accentuate the positives. And we want to accentuate the entire human experience because we think that our church, our organization, our insurance company, our plumbing service, our restaurant, our whatever, that it's worth it. Like, it's worth tossing into the conversation of we're going to make life better. And a lot of people, I think, shy away from if I have to show everything, it's not going to be perfect. Absolutely. Like, Lucy dealt with that in the Vitamita Vegemin deal, right? Like, there's this thing, you're trying to make it real pretty, and you're trying to accentuate it, and then she tastes it. It's like, oh my God, it's terrible, right? Like, if you just,
Then she gets drunk.
like if you just start off with, this is great for you. Taste, you have to work on the taste, but here's the things that are like accentuating the positives, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, that to me, I think when people get that and when they see that, that's what we mean by brands with character. Like, you're a standalone, unique, fully formed, fully visualized entity. Now people can decide what to do with it. They can fall in love with you. They can trust you. They can use your service. They can do all of those things. Without it, lacking authenticity, it's not possible to do that.
Yeah, and they can join your team.
So how often are we finding people trying to pursue a brand before they've pursued their vision?
Daily,
Every single day.
hourly.
Hourly.
And there are some people that we have realized we weren't a good fit because the effort that we were trying to do the effort that we were doing trying to build the brand was somewhat minimized or just completely ignored because we just want to sell more widgets. So let's just compete on price. Let's just compete on quantity. Let's lie about the thing and say that it does a thing that it doesn't actually do, or it's from a place that it's not actually from, or like whatever, right? Any number of different things. All of those things, it's possible to sell more things, possible to sell more stuff, but eventually at some point the bottom falls out because people are brilliant, especially nowadays. Nowadays, people search, research, double search, they listen. You can do something at 10 o'clock and somebody knows about it by 10:30 because that's just the way the world works now. So a lot of the effort towards brand really is on behalf of the client, the parishioner, the customer. We wanted to be sure that things that people that we were working with and products or services or churches or organizations that people were investing in and trusting, that what they were trusting would be 100% honest. But that's not always the case. And it's not always that people are devious or dubious or trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. It's just if you can make it shiny and sparkly and do some smoke and mirrors, we'd rather do that than investing in the work of actually being honest and authentic about who we are. The truth is, we say it all the time, there's a cap for every bottle, right? There's a hat for every head. There is a market looking for any number of things. Especially, some people think we're too small. There's a whole group of people who are looking for the smaller the better. We're not this enough, we're not that enough. There are markets out there for it. The truth is, if you can be honest, communicate that honesty clearly in a way that differentiates you from the rest of the people in the market, you've now built a bridge and people go, that's where I want to go. I mean, I'm thinking about Portrait Church. Clear differentiation. I mean, if you're launching it, clear differentiation from a lot of other churches, and you entered with a desire to want to do that. I'd love to hear you talk a bit more about differentiation and launching and that sort of stuff, especially.
Well, I'm curious too, before I get into that, like, how do you gauge someone's level of honesty and authenticity when you're engaging with them? Because I feel like honesty and authenticity, it takes such a long time to cultivate if it's genuine or not.
Mm-hmm.
And especially like when you're engaging in these spaces, I just feel like, you know, even in the church space, like I see many Christians building brands and building businesses, nonprofits in retaliation to maybe a general view or something culturally that's going on.
Yeah.
And still, to me, it doesn't embody the full goodness of who God is. So if you agree with this side of the spectrum, and then in turn, you're just like, you've just built your brand based off of tearing down and dehumanizing another side, is that actually inherently good then? Like, I just feel like those are the things that I've thought through when it comes to this church, is to not like just sit there and point at what the churches are not doing and what's not going well and culturally what's not happening, and to say, no, there's just a vision of goodness that I believe is inherently can only be produced by God. And I think for me, I've had to honestly see that because I've seen the bad and I've experienced like some very trying times. And so, you know, even just us launching, and you know, sure, we had 400 people, great. And everyone's hitting me up this week.
How did you do it?
How did you do it? It's all good. It's like, I don't care. It's all good. How did you do it? What was the thing? And like, right, everyone wants to get like that shortcut to like, how did you get it? What's the secret sauce? I'm like, yo, we suffered.
Yeah.
We had to endure.
Yeah.
Like, I had 3 knee surgeries. Like, I had to get to a very honest and desperate place with God to understand who is it that you're calling me to be. And so that just makes me wonder, in the bigger conversation, is how are we actually like valuing and interpreting honesty and authenticity from people if we are just like, if I'm just meeting you, right?
Well, it's like the good and bad news is that suffering, that wrestling is the true way of being. Your vision of goodness. I mean, no one's 100% like with integrity all the time, even at like, we're all variables. Like what we were talking yesterday or the day before, like 100% in integrity in one day is impossible. I mean, we're human beings, you know, so like the good hard work of the vision and like going, oh, I'm out of integrity here, I need to get back into integrity. You know, I need to ask forgiveness. I need to repent. Like, can you imagine like an organization or a brand or even like a group, a leader, like doing like, oh, I see how I was out of integrity. Let me get back to the commitment. To me, there's a valuation of honesty and authenticity there.
That's good.
Like leaders being curious about their own behavior and starting from that place. Like you being curious, like you answering Dex's question with a question is you being a curious leader. And I just think that is what it is. Like,
I was going to say, one of my mentors, he said that, pursuing integrity is not doing something perfectly, but wrestling faithfully. So it's that wrestle. It's what you're saying. It's not, it's that curiosity, constantly even evaluating yourself more than you are people. Like, and I just think that's something, that is, that produces a level of authenticity when people are seeing you do that on a consistent basis, faithfully, right? Not when it's going good or not, you know. So I think there's something to that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, on an individual level, I love having personal commitment statements. So you just got personal vision connected to how you show up in an organization, and even inviting people into, these are my actual commitments. So if you see me in alignment with that, like, know that I'm committed to it, And if you see me out of it, just say, hey, like, you weren't actually X, Y, and Z. So like my personal commitment statements are curiosity, being forthright, being courageous. And so sometimes I can get to a spot where I'm not really being curious. And so I invite the people who know, like, those are my commitment statements to be like, hey, you actually didn't show up really curious in that meeting. You kind of came in like
Yeah.
no questions, wanted to get something done.
Yeah.
No, like not open to possibilities. You know, and it's like, okay, that's good. That's good to know. You know,
Yeah.
so you gotta kind of cast the vision, right, for people to be and invite people into it
Yeah.
for it to be effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because a lot of times when we use a word like integrity, I think a lot of people are going to respond naturally by thinking that's an intentional thing. Someone intentionally had a lack of integrity. Whereas a lot of times they just don't know how to look at the problem with completely objective eyes. They've never had anyone speak into them before to give them an outside perspective. A lot of times we need that peeling away process to get to what is integral before we then even have the skills to have integrity in what we're
Yeah.
I love
executing,
that.
Yeah.
right? So,
Yes.
So that's such a good way of describing it and describing the process. I mean, to answer the question, how do we know when people are being honest? First off, we're not the gauge of that.
Sure.
Like we don't have a hell to put them in and have them keep them out of. We simply go through our process. And the goal of our process, we call it an excavation process because it's very much that. We start off talking to people who, without any intention of being dubious or deceptive, oftentimes refer and defer to platitudes and language they've heard somewhere else and describe themselves in a very much we're the Uber of fill in the blank sort of language,
Yeah, yeah.
which really doesn't tell you much about them, because the things that people will maintain a higher level of integrity to are the things that are rooted in them or rooted in the launch of this thing.
yeah.
You hear an origin story, or you hear a founder story, or you hear the story of a business. It's typically a response to a crisis, a problem,
Yeah.
some moment they had as a kid, as a young adult, some transformative kind of deal where then they go, wow, there's actually a crack in the marketplace. We don't know how successful it's going to be, but man, there's just enough of a crack for us to be able to wedge in and sort of make a space for ourselves. And then that ends up, exploding. So we go through the process as a part of the Legible process, really to try to excavate all of the stuff they think we want to hear, or they think the marketplace wants to hear, or they think their parishioners would like to hear, or they think it's going to get them more money, or they think like all of that sort of stuff. We try to excavate all of that, get it back down to a place that's somewhat visceral, emotional, passionate, a place where they can build, expose some conviction, be humble enough to find some context. I mean, this whole entire process is to get them reduced down, exactly what Tom said, to something that is integral, like core to who they are.
Yeah.
And then we do call them to integrity. And I think oftentimes we see integrity in the superhero version of the word, right? Martin Luther King had integrity. Jesus had integrity. Like these sort of, Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa, like these superheroes of humanity. And that oftentimes creates a sense of, A, that was good for them, not necessary for me. I'm just trying to fill in the blank, right? But the truth is, I love the simplest definition of integrity that I've been taught recently. Is very simple. Do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. Done. Personally, corporately, do what you say you're going to do.
That's it.
So what do you say you're going to do?
Yeah.
We can help with that. Now, when are you actually going to do it? And how are you actually going to do it, right? We can help with that. And the people, I think, who have a bit of a reductionist approach to their brand, let's reduce it down to the bare minimum and try to keep it there as much as possible. Find greater success because they are communicating and recommunicating core values, core principles, and a sense of clarity that the marketplace responds really well to. Like the general mental algorithm benefits and rewards repetition, simplicity, stickiness, right? Like these most people push away from complexity, struggle, can't decipher the meaning, that sort of stuff. So,
And honesty, right? I mean, I don't know how to measure it. I don't know scientifically how you explain this, but it's pretty clear that people respond to a message that is coming from a genuine place, right? Brands can't necessarily switch identities because then they would no longer be about what what's at the core of them, right? So one of the things I think we do that's so remarkable is in that peeling away process, we're not only revealing in some cases things that people should stop doing, but sometimes it's things that they should start doing, right? Things that they don't even realize, untapped potential, untapped skills and talents and treasures that they could be bringing to the table to make that vision fully realized, that they may not even realize are leaving on the table most of the time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Unfound treasures. I
Yeah.
love
Yeah,
that
I
you
think-
said that. Yeah.
I think that's so good. And I was thinking as you were talking, Tristan, you're an organizational leader, like an executive director. I feel like one of those untapped things in organizations to even, like this is not always the goal, but to scale the impact
Yeah.
is caring for the team. And it's always like, okay, in a rebrand conversation, you're thinking, we need an updated look. Well, what else needs to be reworked and re-examined for the most like impact that you can make as a team, as an organization?
Yeah.
Would you speak to that? Like, what are some of those things that are untapped as far as organizational health goes? Internal branding is, kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah. We talked about this a bit earlier, but the amount of impact that an organization wants to make is directly connected to the impact and embodiment of the values that exist amongst their staff. And so the more they get the individuals on their teams to embody the values that they actually believe in, the integrity that they committed to as an organization, the more opportunity that organization has for high-performing teams and extraordinary profit, greater brand awareness.
Right.
You're literally creating your brand ambassadors by investing in them significantly to make sure that they're thriving. And the more that happens, the more your organization succeeds. And so what's that look like practically? Sometimes it's just getting down to the nitty-gritty. Does this person understand the values of the organization? Do they have clear job descriptions? Just to be practical, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you respect them enough to know that they have a calling, a gifting that's unique to what you're asking of them as an organization?
Ooh.
And if you're not doing the work to actually help that person courageously step into that, then you're missing out on, as Tom said, some of the treasure that exists around you.
Wow, that's really good.
Yeah.
That's really good. I think that we could talk all day about that. Thinking of like branding conversations, brand ambassadorship in the marketing world is gold.
Golden.
Because really, it's like, I know Jay really well. If he tells me you got to buy this thing or you got to go to this thing, I'm going to try it out. But, I really want to be, so cultivating that relationship with your immediate team, which are your first brand ambassadors.
Yes.
And to this point, churches, I hear churches say this a lot, but nonprofits understand they have a brand more than churches do sometimes. Churches like, stop worrying about our brand, let's worry about our ministry. I'm like, I'm not sure those two things are mutually exclusive. Like, if you have an organization, you have a brand.
Yeah.
A brand is not just a logo, it's not a persona, it's who you are in the world, right?
If you don't choose, your community will choose it for you.
Absolutely.
Which is always happening,
Yes,
right?
it will.
Yeah.
That's
It's
amazing.
co-creation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that same idea of caring for your brand ambassadors, Elena, what is like a way that you can embody that whole thing in content? Like, does that even matter in content? Can you care for your audience? Like, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think you have to start there, right? Like if you're not starting there, and that's what we're talking about, if it's not happening internally, like writing a content strategy is like putting like lipstick on a pig, right? And then like calling it good. I think what's interesting about embodiment is that is thought leadership, right? Like people get in their own way about like, what does it mean for me to show up on social media? Because they're looking at like all these really like loud voices, right? But really embodiment, all it is sharing three things. It's sharing what you believe and what you're doing about it, right? What you believe about the mission you're on, what you're already doing about it, and what is like going on in the conversation that you could actually like, what is sort of like the gap you can fill in like the anti-trafficking conversation, like that you see that's inadequately being talked about? Like how could you actually like go in and fill that gap. Not go, oh, it's already so loud, it's already so noisy. It's like, no, what we don't have is your unique POV that you're already embodying over here.
Yeah.
But it definitely starts internally.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're trying to create a content strategy, that's why integrity is so, integrity is confidence, right? Integrity like breeds so much confidence because you don't have to lie. Like at the end of the day, marketing is simply telling the truth. So if you can get really clear about what are your values, what's already happening, like you're already on the front lines of like doing things like ending human trafficking, like you're already like ending poverty. You can figure out marketing because all it is telling the stories that are already happening.
Yeah.
When you're in brand integrity, everything is content.
Yeah.
And I don't want to overwhelm people, but really, when you are in brand integrity, everything becomes content. And it's really, it's an invitation to people who desperately want to know that they're seen and that they're making a difference.
Absolutely.
And social media, that's all we're looking for. When people share, they're looking for, do you see me? And what NGOs and like churches have the unique ability to do is not just say, I see you with a like, but really invite them into the story and actually invite them into changing their identity. And that's how to approach social media as a nonprofit and as a church. It's like, it's not this place for you to perform like what's going on at your church, at your kids' services or all these things. It's an invitation to families to know that there's a place for them to feel seen and that there's an invitation, there's something bigger, greater that they can be invited into.
Yeah.
Because we're all looking for that, right? We're all looking to step into an identity and be seen.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things that general marketplace corporations, companies, businesses, they understand it better than many nonprofits and churches, even though most nonprofits and churches actually generate and create actual community better than brands, businesses, and corporations. But brands and businesses and corporations get it, right? Like you're a Nike guy or an Adidas guy, rarely is there, you may be, brand agnostic and not claim to be one or the other. But if you're a Nike guy and that's your claim, you're not gonna be caught dead in Adidas and vice versa. There's something to the that power of the brand being a surrogate or I'm trying to think, it's other than just community building. It's like it itself becomes aspirational. It presents an aspiration that then people transfer their own effort, worth, value, whatever these words mean. They transfer that onto the brand because the brand has figured out how to communicate that we're doing that well. So when Nike says just do it, it's both their brand statement, but it's what like the average Nike guy gets up with that spirit and that attitude. I'm just gonna do it. Like it's crazy. Let's just do it. I wish that not even I wish. There's a real art to being able to do that, and it's one of the things that I love about the work that we do is that sort of the jazz of taking these instruments that we're able to get from brand builders and from solopreneurs and from pastors and all of these folks that come in that we work with to sort of get these instruments and then really start to play with how that gets presented in a way that a community is built, sometimes just by statements, by content, by words. That's me. Like a name, right? Just simply a title. It's like, oh, that's me. And it's one of the things I think people feel like they bang their heads against a wall, and they do bang their heads against the wall, trying to find that piece of magic. And oftentimes you're hours, weeks away from having that done when we sit down, when we work together.
Well, because I think organizations have it flipped, right? They're seeking the best content that's going to create momentum in their brand. Instead of understanding that if they get really true to their brand and understand what their vision is, they're going to then be able to communicate it in a way that will attract the people that are aligned with their mission, which then gives them the momentum that they see, right? They want to skip to the end because our familiarity, especially on social media, has taught us that things get hot we're not necessarily trying to help organizations get hot.
Right.
We want to help them be true to who they are
Right.
and actually create something of lasting value in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
And they're going to attract the people that want to do that with them by being true to themselves first.
Yeah. And once that happens, it's very difficult to
Stop
keep
it.
silent
Yeah,
about it.
Yeah, you can't stop it.
It's like, you eat a great meal. First thing, hey man, you gotta try this.
Yeah.
I fell in love with my wife. I'm smiling like a jackass Bumblebee. Like I couldn't. Everywhere I went, people were like, "What's going on with you?"
Yeah.
You would not believe it. She said yes. How crazy is that, right?
Yeah.
Brands can create that experience
Yeah.
without the Cupid's arrow even
Yeah.
being involved. It just needs to be a passionate, true, honest, value-driven commitment that this is what we're about. We're always about it. We're never not going to be about it. We're going to keep ringing this bell, and you will find people have been waiting for that bell.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
the thing. Waiting. Yeah. Yeah, because nonprofits, so many brands that sell products, right? Like Nike, like all the brands that sell products that we create, like we feel so bought in because it's like people like me do things like this. I think Seth Godin said that.
Mhm.
And the thing about branding and about social media is just like, yeah, people are waiting for that invitation. And I think that more than that, they're waiting to be like, I just totally lost it. I totally lost it because I got really, really excited.
I get that.
I got super excited.
Yep.
I think I'm in love with Noemi now, but I totally lost what I was going to say. It'll come back to me.
So yeah, well, I was also thinking it's like both. It's being true to who you are, and then there's a really important dynamic in marketing and branding, and that is serving those with care that are in your stewardship, and your audience is your stewardship as well as your community, those who you serve, like as a nonprofit, but also your donors, and so often I notice brands like they're with full like good intentions. This is our mission. This is who we are, and that's how they sell it.
Yeah.
It's like, this is who we are. This is our mission, and these are how we do what we do. And here's all the things that we do, and then it's missing that like connection point for the people you're serving, the people you want to invite in. So there's a level of like service and storytelling and connection that is demanded. Like I just met with an organization the other day. They showed me their giving plan for the year. Like, here's our mission as an organization. Here's the bullet list of all the things, the programs we have. And I was like, that's good. And like, where's the transformation? Where's the connection point to the donor? So Jay, I know you've done a lot of this work. Like, would you speak to that? Like, what are some things that you're thinking as I say those things?
Yeah, I just think like most people think that, specifically in nonprofit world, that if you just have this big bucket and you just sell them your vision, then everyone will just give to the bucket and they'll be satisfied giving to the bucket. And it's like, that's not how it works. Like for us, the nonprofit that I was a part of, one of the most brilliant shifts that we made, and this was before COVID, was we stopped telling people that you're just giving to a bucket, and we were very intentional with giving you something specific, like very specific, that you were a part of, that you played a tangible role in helping us all collectively accomplish this vision.
Yeah.
So it was like now not only they didn't have a bucket, they had a name of a people, they had a story, they had updates, so when COVID hit and when everyone's thinking about, well, how's my economical situation going to be? Like, in my mind, what I did with most things I gave to, if I gave to a bucket, like, I'm like, all right, well, I'm just out. I'm not really attached to it. It was a good cause. Like, that's great. Yeah. But now I'm thinking of like Josh and Erica. I'm thinking about what they're doing over in that country that has an incredible need. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm a part of that, and I'm just, now it's personal to me. Now I'm like, I'm in it with them. Like, I'm just imagining, like, the vision is so much greater, and I'm brought in at a much more intentional level. And I've been updated, so I actually know. And I think that's one of the missing elements when it comes to, like, development and caring for donors, is, like, it's almost like people assume that, like, because you give that, like, you really... Like that you're all in and that you really like them. But like in our culture, it's like, man, I'll just find the next best thing that
Yeah.
like
Yes.
that will
Yeah.
articulate it, especially with like the next generation of donors.
Yeah.
We're the conversation that we were
Yeah.
having earlier of like social media and all those things. Like I think they are looking at social media, but I do think they're looking to see who's going to be honest the longest.
Yes.
And whose integrity is going to last the longest. Because again, we live in a culture where like if you slip up a little bit and there's something that happens and it's like, yo man, if they're not attached to the vision, they're out quick.
Yeah.
And so for me, I just think there has to be like a level of intentionality. And I'll give you a very practical thing. You know, as a church plant, I remember sitting down with Dex and I had this vision and all this stuff. And he's like, okay, this is really good, but like, let's break it down how much this is exactly going to cost, right? And I'm just like, wow, okay, so you know a lot more than me. I need a bigger vision for how I'm going to develop this because, again, because for us, like we're trying to connect in some areas that are neglected. Who these people don't have a socioeconomic, like, economical base that we're going to expect them to give and give a certain amount. And so for me, one of the things that as I just began to think through this process is inviting people in, like not just to like give to our church, but we actually walked every single street in the side of the community that we are trying to reach, and we took down every street name that like people live at, and we said, hey, like when you give to us, like we're gonna give you a street that we need you to pray for. And can I tell you what could happen? So one of the things I think people do in storytelling is they tell you like what has happened. I'm like, no, you always got to tell people what could happen.
Yes.
Let me tell you what could happen.
That's good stuff.
Let me tell you what could happen.
Yeah.
Like nice avenue, like you're praying for that avenue, and one day there's going to be a family that comes to Portrait, and they're going to get a renewed picture of who Jesus is. They're going to accept him, and guess what? I'm going to message you.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, yo, the street that you're praying for, yo, Ralph, he just accepted Christ.
Yeah.
Thank you for praying for him.
Yeah.
Like, do you think that they're gonna like want to
good.
dip out after? You know,
Yeah.
no, they're gonna be like, yo, who else is on the street?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go down there and pray. You know,
Yeah.
and so one of my favorite things has been seeing people who don't go to our church. Like I have a family who lives all the way out in LA. They came out to our preview service, and then afterwards, I got a picture of them on the street that they were given and say, hey, we're just walking and we're praying for her right now.
That's so good.
And so it's like, how do you give
Really
people, like again, because prayer is it's integral to who we want to be, and so how are we inviting people intentionally into that?
Yeah.
And then that just means we got to go to extra mile. We got to go count the streets. We got to go get the names.
Yeah.
We got to go
Yeah.
like do that so that we can live with integrity.
Yeah.
I love that perspective on it. I was talking to a pastor friend of mine, and the conversation got really heated about church attendance and all this sort of stuff. And he, at one point, just kind of exclaimed, "No, it's because people just don't want to go to church anymore." And I was like, "You are right. People don't want to just go to
Yeah.
church anymore."
Yeah.
So it used to be, church is in the middle of the city. The whole city was built around it. What did you do on Sundays? You go to church. And then you leave and you go back. I spent some years in Texas. People would show up to church. They would tailgate all day on Saturday. Show up to church, still reeking a beer. But they would go to church.
Yeah.
People are done going to church. Instead, now if we're talking about partnering them with a mission, people are in on that. And not just in churches. People are subscribing to YouTubers. People are paying money to folks on Instagram. People are saying, I'll join you on the mission. I'll give money, time, effort, likes. Like, you'll get my vote. The church is still oftentimes, though, expecting people to come just because we're here. Like, that's the statement. Hey, we're here, so come. Then you have a moment like COVID, where you were not there. So now you've got almost a year where people are able to say, that's not so bad.
Seem to be all right.
Right. Like all the things that were supposed to happen because I didn't go to church, that hasn't happened. So now you're wrestling with a model that now has been completely upended.
Yeah.
So now what do? Well, the model that has existed with the most effectiveness from Jesus' time and even before is to convince people that there's a place for them in your mission.
Yeah.
And that's when, like, that to me is the magic of all of these sort of disciplines together.
Yeah.
We can make it look great, make it relate to the community. We can build out values. We can help you know when to communicate it. We can take care of the team. We can be sure that you're, financially stable. Like all of those things together. The reason we do all that is so that it's easy for you to create a space for people to join. Join your nonprofit, join your church, join your whatever products you're selling, join your community. If you can create a space for people to join, people are ready to join.
That's the power of a clear vision too.
Yeah.
Is like when the church, we have a united mission, the Great Commission, and each church has their unique vision. So linking back, okay, when a COVID happens, if all you're focused on is the programming or the gathering or this and that, like we can't gather, but like go back to the vision. It's like it's like the GPS. It's recalculating now. How can we make our vision happen in the world, knowing the context of the world? The vision anchors you. Like it's not a step by step. Thank God, back for the Thomas Guide days. Like you're old enough, It's a GPS. It's a recalculating anchor. So then we can invite people into the vision as a brand, as an organization. What were we going to say?
I was going to say, but we so easily, as leaders, deceive ourselves. Our ability to do that is just really vast. Like we think that it's, even to Jay's point earlier, like we come in with a sense of scarcity, and so we're already trying to prioritize the bucket or trying to prioritize the profit, and we forget the power of the impact, the values, the storytelling. Me and my wife sit in spaces sometimes, and we've heard some incredible stories, and like even if we are sitting in scarcity, like we figuring it out. Like we put whatever we got out, we're like, that was we invested in this. Like, you know what I mean? Like we write checks, like we gonna put money in the bank later to make sure that they get this. You know what I mean? Like we're gonna figure this out, but we just we haven't identified how significantly they correlate to one another. Totally. But it's one of my favorite. You guys ever seen Kitchen Nightmares with Gordon Ramsay? One of my all-time favorite shows. What is always amazing about it, though, is how Gordon has this conversation with an owner, and an owner is always like, well, people just aren't coming anymore. Like, our food hasn't changed. Like, what we've been doing is the same. They just stopped coming all of a sudden. And then he gets in and he sees the stuff. There's no care for the staff. There's no care for the product anymore. There's just no standard. There's no integrity. And he forces these leaders to actually sit down and see how much they've betrayed themselves and how much they've deceived themselves into thinking this thing that was once good is able to continue to be sustained without the actual maintenance and the actual care, right?
Well, I go back to this example that you're talking about, because the pivot that most churches had to make during that season was that they had to go online. They had to. And then what happens is you fall in love with the metrics of online. And then now we're back in person. And so not only did you invest a ton of resources, and you're still measuring old metrics that don't actually apply to the vision that you have. Now you find yourself, I think one of the things, from a church standpoint, we actually made it worse for people because we made them feel so compelled that they can get everything at home. We haven't introduced them to the sacredness of saying, what does it mean to be together? What does it mean to create this space where they could actually show up and bring their person and not because there was a level of safety that home meant. There's a level of protection. And I think what I, at least in my circle of experience, I saw people that felt in love with success, but it was on, right? It's the person that said you climb the ladder and realize you're on the wrong side, right? It was like you climbed that success ladder of like metrics and what reach you had, but your reach actually wasn't tied to what you were valuing in the mission. And so then it's like that I love your verbiage of like recalculating. Because I do think like that is something that I think as a leader, you are constantly pushing against like other people and maybe even people on your team, but like people's opinions or their thoughts on what success is. And you have to constantly like recalculate. Like this week, I've had to recalculate so much just because we had a very successful launch according to people's standards, right? And it's like, oh, what are you doing here? And what are you going to do to do this? And what are you going to do to maintain? The best thing I did this week was cut off we ran a series of marketing ads just to let people know that we were opening. The best thing I did this week was to cut it off. And I said, no, like we launched, like people know we're here, and now like let's live honestly, so that who we said we were going to be is actually who they're going to experience.
Yeah.
But the pushback that I got from people was like, well, why would you do that?
Yeah.
You have so much momentum. Like, well, that's not our vision to build that way.
Yeah.
And so there's this constant like
Come on.
recalculating that we have to do because of the shiny,
Yep.
successful thing that it wasn't our vision, but you think that that's what it should be. You know,
Yeah.
so I do think that there's this constant reframing, recalculating that vision and values and these things could do for you. But I think the temptation of every human being is that we think we can design goodness apart from
Yeah.
God.
Oh.
Yeah.
And it's like he's the one. You know?
Well, and beyond even
That's
churches,
so
sorry, Tristan.
Yeah, no, you're good.
How would an organization measure that they were successful if they weren't allowed to use growth as a metric?
Yeah.
So if you think about churches, you say, okay, I want to know if you feel like you're growing as an organization. You can't tell me about your attendance, and you can't tell me about your giving. How do you know you're doing what God called you to do?
Yeah.
You got to come up with some other ways to measure
Yeah.
it. And if you don't have that vision and values in place, how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up. There's this old church adage that people always say, everything healthy grows. And I always remind people, cancer grows.
Got some
Weeds-
weeds in my
weeds
backyard.
grow.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Like, there's all kinds of really bad stuff that grows. So I love the question of metrics, especially because I think it would call people into questioning what actually are we doing right now? Which could be a question that should continue to go back to continue back all of the epochs, whether it's church growth or nonprofits, having at one point places like the United Way or the YMCA, just massive impact on culture as nonprofit organizations. You're able to look back now in history and go, oh, like that's what they were doing. That's what they were trying to achieve. We can see that because we can watch the life cycle of it.
Yeah.
Well, the church right now is in a new life cycle. It achieved what it wanted to do pre-COVID, which was get as many people into as many buildings as possible, including giant stadiums for any number of magical moments, right? So people can come and have this great time and it also be effective for the time. Like, this isn't a knock on, I've been on, Promise Keeper stages and crusade stages and all this sort of stuff. Those were effective for the time. Now, though, I feel like culture is asking different questions and it is requiring different programming that is not anti-Great Commission. It is not anti-biblical. It is not anti any of those things. It is probably, though, anti-big light, smoke machines, stuff coming from the roof and ceiling, all of which I have spent years creating for people. But now the metrics are, if you look at the metrics, many metrics are telling different stories. Churches actually aren't losing as much money as they were just a few years ago. Financially, churches are fine. Attendance, though, people are still navigating. Am I showing up consistently? What am I showing up for? So churches are continuing to swing for the fences with events and bigger and better, and let's get people back in the seats when people are more mobilized now, probably than they ever have been, possibly in the history of the church. I would say at least since Acts chapter 5, 6, 7, somewhere around there. People are more mobilized now and could be doing and receiving and being a part of a church community that may not look like what it looked like 4 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Expectations could be different. Tools that we're giving them to be able to evangelize could be different. And the same thing with nonprofits. Nonprofits are actually somewhat inverted. People are still talking about them, loving them, liking them. Finances are down, giving is down, but giving blood is down. Like anything that looks like generosity. In the general nonprofit space is inverted, but likes are up, engagement is up. Like, so now the metrics are completely flipped, which is the best possible thing. It's the best thing because it means that evolution is going to happen, change is going to happen, new growth is going to happen, meaning you're going to start budding new ideas, and those new ideas are going to attach themselves to people that never considered your old ideas. Now they get to come be a part of a community, demonstrate their own generosity, have their own lives changed.
Yeah.
But you can't do that without developing the core of who you are, without saying, here's the path that we're going to walk that's unlike anyone else's path. And we're going to learn everything we can and try as absolutely hard as we can, be as absolutely honest as possible. And we are going to trust that this thing that is pounding in our chest, that our heart is going to show through in a way that is going to attract people to us. Done.
That's it.
Yeah.
Amen.
You do that. You've had the best day possible.
Yeah, that's the good work. We could talk for another hour or so, but we'll save that for the next conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you. You guys are amazing. I'm so honored to be a part of this table and this team. For those of you listening, we are Legible, and we do the wonderful work of helping you become a brand with character and integrity so that you can make the greatest impact that you want to make in the world. In a world that's obsessed with looking good, we want to help you do good. And this is my team. So we want you to check out a couple things. You can have our whole team come. We're a whole group of consultants and coaches where we are going to help you align and embody the vision that God has given you, the vision of your organization. Get clear on that. And then even just like Dex said, assess where we are in culture and what is needed to make that vision happen. So check out legible.org for some of our services and consulting workshops that we have coming up. And we can't wait to share more of this conversation with you in the future.